All right. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Not really sure how to start this, but essentially, I'm a huge NBA fan. Love the history of the game. Love talking about the storylines of the greatest players of all time, how it impacts the game today, how the game has changed over the decades, and ultimately where I think and hope the sport goes. Basketball being such a beautiful game has so many different components, from the X's and O's to the media, um, player demands, play styles, coaching styles. There's just so many things to talk about revolving basketball. And, today I kind of want to talk about a hot topic that's hit recently over the last year and a half or so, um, in terms of who the face of the NBA truly is. Obviously, this has been a very popular conversation as of late, given the fact that when you look at over the last 10 years, kind of who's been running the league, obviously you have LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. Probably for most NBA fans, the three names that comes to mind when you look at the 2010s era of basketball. But as we all know, their time is slowly dwindling to the end. LeBron obviously turned 40 years old last year, arguably the greatest player of all time, if not the greatest. Steph is approaching 38 years of age, Durant around the same as Steph. And while they're still, all three of them are still probably top 10 players in the league, the inevitable is coming and the end is near. And with that, the question has come in terms of who's got the next spot up in the line, who's got the throne. And, for me, I don't think that's something you can just hand out and give away and say, oh, this guy, we can manufacture someone like Anthony Edwards, for example, as the face of the NBA, or Victor Wembanyama or Cooper Flag, who just got drafted, obviously, to the Dallas Mavericks in improbable fashion this past season. It's one of those things when you look back at the history of the NBA, starting all the way back from the 60s, it's one of those things that the fans and the media don't choose the face of the league. The face of the league ultimately comes through based on their level of play, accomplishments, and their ability to win in the highest level, meaning championships, right? I mean, if you look at the 60s, kind of just going through each decade, you had Russell, Chamberlain, West, all three ended up, obviously Russell, most championships in the history of the NBA as a player and a coach, combined 11 championships. Wilt ended up getting a couple of chips as well. Jerry West, who actually only ended up getting one championship, but I believe was 1-9 in the NBA Finals, and to this day is the only player in the history of the NBA to win Finals MVP despite a loss. Obviously, Jerry West is the logo of the NBA as well. Wilt, he's somewhat of a Greek mythology in a sense, dropping 100 points in an individual game, averaging 50 points for an entire season. And Russell arguably is the greatest winner leader in the history of sports. They set the precedent in terms of what it takes from a pure, not only talent perspective, but an accomplishment perspective to even be in the conversation as a face, quote unquote, face of the league. Um, kind of going on to the 70s, you had a little bit of a dead period in the NBA, if we're being quite honest. Um, you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, obviously most NBA MVPs by an individual player in NBA history. Uh, Five-time champion, multiple-time Finals MVP. His playing career, obviously, he played, I believe it was 20 to 22 years. I think it was 21 to be exact. For a long time, he was the all-time leading scorer of the game. He had obviously the unstoppable skyhook. To this day, no one has ever come close or even tried to replicate. And he was just so proficient at that shot, which is pretty remarkable to think about. That even today, that it's not something that's done on a regular basis. Maybe every once in a blue moon, someone will pull it out. But um, you also had Dr. J, who in the 70s was primarily dominating the ABA at the time, the American Basketball Association. But ultimately, when the ABA and NBA merged in 1976, 76 or 79, don't quote me on that. No script here, so I'm just kind of spitballing. Dr. J was multiple-time All-NBA. He was also obviously multiple-time All-ABA. I believe he won. Just checking out my notes here. Yeah, he was a 7-time All-NBA select. He made the All-NBA team 7 times, and he made 4 All-ABA teams. 3-time ABA MVP, 1-time NBA MVP, 3-time ABA championship, and also won a championship with the 76ers in 1981 with that Moses Malone led Sixers as well. Obviously, moving forward to the 80s, this was the Showtime Lakers and the Celtics, the Lakers and the Celtics rivalry, which included Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, 2 of the most pivotal players in the game's history, primarily because of the trajectory of the NBA at the time and how viewership was declining, and there really needed to be a spark in order to essentially save the league, and those 2 players delivered at the highest level. Larry Bird remains one of the few players, I think him and Wilt Chamberlain, perhaps there's someone else, to win 3 straight league MVPs. As dominant as someone like Nikola Jokic in today's day has been, being a finalist for the last 5 years or 5 years, he hasn't achieved that feat of 3 straight MVPs in a row. During a time where Magic Johnson was also at the top of his game, and he was also able to win 3 MVPs in that decade. Larry Bird won 3 championships, Magic won 5 championships, and obviously both players were selected to the All-NBA team a decade plus, with the majority of that being All-NBA first team. Then we go on to the 90s, where you have Michael Jordan. Universally, I think still, obviously LeBron has closed the gap, and it's a fantastic debate to have between Jordan or LeBron. You guys can tell me who you guys have in the comment section below, but I think still universally he's recognized as the greatest player of all time. Changed the game with his shoes. People wanted to be like Mike, commercials, media. Obviously social media wasn't around at the time, but he was revolutionizing how athletes could also be celebrities, and he was on top of the world. He's world renowned. He went well beyond the game of basketball in the NBA. He touched every corner of the earth, and there's not really much to say about Michael Jordan. You can throw in Hakeem Olajuwon there. He was the only player in that era outside of Jordan during that 8-year stretch to win a championship. Obviously, Jordan retired for a year and a half, came back in 95, played only 17 games down the stretch, and ended up getting eliminated by the Orlando Magic, I believe in the second round. But Hakeem, I mean, all-time shot blocker, all-time leader in shots blocked in the history of basketball, decade plus of All-NBA selection, invented the Dream Shake footwork that's, to this day, you see players like Joel Embiid replicate, and it's a homage to the great Hakeem Olajuwon. So, yeah, in a sense, you can say Jordan was he was obviously the primary face, but it wouldn't be fair to not mention the greatness of Hakeem. And then going up to the 2000s, you have Shaq, Kobe, Tim Duncan, all pretty similar resumes. 10, 15 years, all NBA, all defensive, multiple MVPs. Obviously, Kobe only ended up getting one. Actually, Shaq and Kobe only ended up getting one. Duncan had 2 NBA MVPs, all three combined, 5, 4, 9, and then Duncan had 5 himself, so 14 championships. I mean, those 3 players essentially ran the next 15 or so years of the NBA. So, I mean, when you think of that era, those are the 3 guys most people think of. And then it comes down to the 2000s, you have LeBron, Steph, and Durant. And every decade we go, there's just a consistent theme. There's guys that have been all NBA for 10 plus years, won multiple MVPs, led teams as the best player on a championship-led team for at least 1 or 2 seasons. I mean, these are the greatest players of all time. So I think if we're trying to predict who the face of today's NBA is going to be, the bare minimum has to mean that those players or that player wins multiple championships, wins multiple MVPs, and dominates the league for a decade plus. And as much talent as there is in the NBA, that just isn't achievable for the vast majority of superstars. Obviously, when looking at names, a lot of people are throwing around Anthony Edwards, and rightfully so, with his athletic prowess and him becoming actually one of the best high-volume shooters, quite honestly, the league has ever seen. You see Victor Wembanyama being thrown around, Cooper Flagg now, who recently got drafted. Even some of the slightly older guys, but not too old, like SGA, Tatum. Unfortunately, Tatum just tore his Achilles, so we'll have to see how he bounces back from that. But at the end of the day, those players will come to the surface one way or another, and there will be a guy who is touted as the face of the league at some point. I think one interesting question is, people like to ask, does personality and showmanship matter? And for me, I think yes, to some extent. To be the face of the league, you have to be marketable in a sense where people gravitate towards you, fans gravitate towards you, and you're able to draw large crowds. But if we're being quite honest, if you're that good of a player, your game is going to speak for itself. You take Tim Duncan, for example. He was the big fundamental. A lot of people thought his game was boring, and he wasn't a big media guy at the time, but the results spoke for themselves. He consistently ended up on the biggest stage, was always amongst the best players in the league in terms of MVP race, and dominated at every single thing that he did on the basketball court, when it came to defense, post work, setting screens, getting his teammates involved, being a leader. It's just undeniable, and if you're that good, it doesn't matter how marketable or non-marketable you are, people are going to gravitate towards you regardless. So yes, I think marketability can help. It can boost your standing as the face. Maybe you become the primary face, like LeBron, Jordan, Magic. Those guys clearly wanted it to some extent. They relished with the cameras. They enjoyed talking to the media. They liked building the storylines, which is obviously fantastic for the NBA. But again, it comes down to the accomplishments, the championships, the MVPs, the All-NBA selections, and being the best player or amongst the top 3 or 4 best players in the league for 10 plus years. And so that remains to be seen. There are guys who have that potential. And honestly, another conversation comes to play with the new collective bargaining agreement and just how competitive the league has been over the last 7 years. We haven't had a repeat champion since 2018 when the Golden State Warriors won it. So last 7 champions or so have been a different team every single year. So that begs the question, will there be enough championships to go around for one player to really solidify themselves as the past greats, or will everyone get a fair share of awards, championships, and individual accolades because of how dominant and competitive the league is today? Not to mention the CBA making it more restrictive for teams like the Celtics or the Thunder to remain a solid core for more than 2 or 3 years. It makes it a lot harder to compete year in and out, and perhaps the dynasty is dead, and with that there might be a new perspective in terms of who gets to be the face of the league. So because if everyone starts winning championships and there's like 8 or 9 guys, ultimately you can't have 8 or 9 faces of the league. There's going to have to be someone that stands out, and how that gets determined may change moving forward. Regardless, I think I've yapped for a bit now, so I'm going to leave it to you guys in the comment section. What are your thoughts on this whole conversation? Please feel free to drop some comments, have some discourse, and I'd love to know what you guys are thinking. If you like these kind of videos, these are pretty much non-scripted. I have some notes here about some of the players, but if you like these kind of historic breakdowns of how history shapes what we see today and just cool stories about the NBA, please like this video, share, and subscribe, and I will maybe see you guys next week. We'll see how this goes. Cool. Peace.